So this is where you learn how to train and feed your dog better from one dog mom to another. And today I'm going to explain my three main concerns with most every single dog food out there. Two easy solutions to fix it, and some things that I look for in brands. And then make sure you stay tuned until the end because I will be sharing specifically what I look for in foods and how to avoid what I believe to be a huge issue in the pet food industry. And to start, I want to preface something important, which is I am not anti kibble. In fact, I think that there is a time and a place for kibble in many households. Don't forget that I fostered Marlowe, a puppy mill rescue, for months before we adopted her, and she came from a rescue that uses kibble. So I do think that there are places for kibble, and I'm seeing a mainstream shift in the kibble and pet food industry towards higher quality options, which is exciting. But there are some things that I feel like are confusing for a lot of pet parents and dog guardians that I really want to address in this video. And it might get a little technical at some points, but I promise to keep it pretty simple, pretty high level. Any research I talk about will be linked in the description of my YouTube. And again, for those of you on Instagram, make sure you put your questions on my YouTube channel, which the link is in my stories if you're not familiar. So let's talk about some things about kibble. Let's talk about how it's manufactured, and let's talk about why those things and the way that it's produced will impact your dog's health. Period. End of story. And this is based on research, not just on what I personally believe or think. Again, I want to preface that everything I talk about in this video and all of my content is based off of me being my degree is in nutrition science. I am a human nutritionist, researched dog mom that also studies intensively, studies canine nutrition. And so this is what's worked best for my dogs. So let's talk about kibble and let's talk about what applies to most popular dog foods out there. 99.5% of them will say. And that is that most popular kibble, and this is very important for you to understand, is cooked and extruded at extremely high temperatures. Here's the key: in short time frame. So there's an extreme amount of processing, high pressure, high temperature cooking in very short periods of time. Extrusion, or when the manufacturers extrude their kibble. And again, this applies regardless to if your dog's kibble is sourced well. This is regardless to if they have quality ingredients, which we'll talk about in a moment. And this applies to your brand of kibble, even if they have really good marketing. So this applies, and it's something that's not talked about enough, in my opinion. And it's something I'm just tired of misleading pet parents. So pretty much all kibble is cooked and extruded at extremely high temperatures. And extrusion is when all of the raw material, all of the ingredients of the pet food, the meat, the organs, the supplements, the vitamin synthetics, the produce, if any is added, are mixed together, and then they're cooked under high temperature, high pressure, and they're forced through a die, which is what creates those little kibble pellet nuggets that we're all so familiar with. And then they fill it into the bags. And this makes it, the reason this happens is this is a very affordable process, and this makes the product shelf stable. This is why you can buy a bag of kibble and you'll see that the expiration date is 1, 2, maybe even 2.5 years out. But this, my friend, is a problem. And that's what I want to talk about. So, again, to preface, I'm not anti kibble. There are ways to address this, but it is important that we know this. Make sure, if you're not already following or subscribed to me here on YouTube, that you do that for ways to learn how to train and feed your dog better, and for daily dog tips. So, let's go back to the extrusion process, because I also want to preface, here's a lot of little prefaces, is that I am not here creating content to tell you what to do. Rather, I want to educate you so that you can make an informed decision and feel confident about that decision. That's really important to me, because I feel like there's a lot of people on social media and in the world that are just telling us what to do. And I'm tired of being told what to do. So I'm sure you are. And so I want to give you the tools and the resources you need to make a good decision that you feel good about. So let's talk about the extrusion process a little bit more. And let's talk about what this high temperature, high pressure extrusion process does to the nutrients and the proteins and the amino acids in kibble. Again, regardless of the brand, this applies to most of them. First off, the extrusion process that we talked about involves extreme high temperatures, and research shows that this process can denature proteins. We'll talk about what that means in a moment. It can deplete nutrients, aka remove nutrients. And probably most concerning is that it removes most of the moisture from the ingredients. Because remember, the process started with getting all these raw ingredients, these raw materials, and that moisture is sucked out through the high pressure, high heat, ultra processing techniques. And the problem with that is that that leaves most kibbles, even the most popular brands out there that you're seeing, it leaves most kibbles with only about 6 to 10% moisture in the food. And this is a problem because dogs were designed to get their moisture for the most part from their food. That's how they're designed to do it. Whereas if you looked at a cooked food, a homemade food, gently cooked, fresh or raw diet, those diets can have anywhere from 50 to 70% moisture or more in the food. So you can see the differences there. And you can actually see that when you're holding a bunch of kibble versus wet, moist food. So you could imagine how dehydrating a typical kibble can be, especially if you don't have a dog that drinks a lot of water or fluids on their own. So that's concern number one, is that the actual process of creating this kibble that is so convenient for you and I to feed is that it can deplete nutrients, it can denature proteins. Again, we'll talk about what that means, and it can remove, or it does remove, most of the moisture. The benefit of that, though, is that you have a convenient, easy to food that's food, convenient, easy food to feed that is shelf stable, can sit on the shelf for months and months and years at a time, and is lower cost in general. But at what cost to our dog's health is that? So let's talk about a Norwegian study that was done back in this was maybe 5, 6 years ago, and I will link any studies I reference below. And it actually showed that the denaturing process that occurs during the manufacturing of kibble makes protein less digestible. So, what that means is they added fresh chicken in with the food and measured how digestible the chicken was. They measured how many nutrients and amino acids were they actually getting from the protein added in the food. And it was far less than feeding a less processed, real fresh food diet. And I'll talk more about fresh food diets versus kibble diets in just a moment. So, first off, now we have a problem with kibble is that lack of moisture, lack of ability to absorb and digest the protein that's actually in it, and the denaturing and depletion of the nutrients in the food. So, these are some problems, and I will in a moment talk about how I address these because this is kind of scary to hear about, but at the same time, there are solutions that can make a world of difference. So stay tuned and I'll get to that. Another problem with most kibbles out there is sourcing. So what you'll find with most of the popular brands is that sourcing is going to be feed grade instead of what I prefer, which is human grade. Feed grade are foods that are deemed unfit for human consumption. So it could be any part of the animal. The quality of that sourcing could be questionable, and likely, not always, but likely inhumane sourcing practices, which I know that you and I are not big fans of. And that's a really, really big red flag. So I will talk a little bit more about some brands that have sourcing I respect in just a moment. Another study that was done, and this study I'll link below as well, showed that during the manufacturing process where high heat is applied to the food to make it into a kibble, is that high heat uh, can actually impact lysine. And lysine is an essential amino acid. It is a building block of protein, which is absolutely critical and essential for our dog's development and overall health and longevity. And it actually shows that lysine was negatively impacted during this extrusion, high heat, high pressure process that is done to kibble all over the world, which is really, really, really concerning because even if the bag of food says that there's X percent of protein in the food, how much of that, how much of that is actually digestible and bioavailable, meaning available to your dog to actually get from? So that's a really big concern. The other big concern about this amino acid specifically, aka lysine, is that it is an essential amino acid. And essential means that the dog's body cannot make it on their own. Instead, they have to get it from their dog's food. So think about how concerning that could be if the dogs cannot absorb that properly because of the way the food has been manufactured. In addition to that, when we talk about depletion of nutrients when they're extremely processed, let me actually back up and let's just like take a step back and think about us as humans. And we look at fresh foods in our grocery store on the perimeter of the grocery store building. We have fresh vegetables, we have fresh fruits, we have fresh meats. And these foods, we all know as common sense, and any practicing physician would agree, and any nutritionist would agree that these foods generally have better nutrients, better bioavailability of these nutrients, macronutrients, micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. And then when you go into the middle part of the grocery store in the aisles where all the processed foods are, they go through similar heat, pressure, and extrusion processing to make it shelf stable, that the nutrients are not as bioavailable. The nutrients aren't as rich and of variety. And so, what I'm really saying is that the way that kibble, in most cases, and I'll talk about a few that are different outliers, but the way that most kibble is manufactured is through a process that is very similar to how cereal manufacturers process food, cookie and cracker companies manufacture and process that food. And when you compare those two processes, it's actually really eye opening. So, when I'm talking about kibble, what I'm talking about is an ultra processed food. And I'm not, again, anti kibble. There are ways to lessen the detriments that I'm talking about, but it's important you know that these are real in a reality. So let's talk about another study by the Animal Nutrition Group. This was back in 2007 or 2008, and this was done actually out of the Netherlands. They showed that the extrusion process in kibble destroys really, really important vitamins. A couple examples are vitamin E, vitamin A. Marlo's dreaming. Can you hear her kind of whimpering? But it completely destroys vitamin E, vitamin A, the B group vitamins in dry food, which is really important to understand. And this is why, you guys, this is why when we look at the back of a bag of kibble, you'll see all of the ingredients. And then towards the end, you'll usually see a variety of words you aren't super familiar with connected to numbers. And these are the vitamin synthetic packs that are sprayed on. Why are these added onto the food? Well, what happens is after the extrusion and cooking and high pressure process of kibble, the manufacturer knows because of testing that many of the nutrients are removed, depleted, not bioavailable. So they have to spray it on in synthetic form. It's similar to how they make cereal fortified. You see on the cereal, it says under the nutrition panel, it'll say contains 12% of your vitamin A requirements and 100% of your vitamin C, folic acid, etc. That's a synthetic vitamin. So it's really concerning that they know how nutrients are impacted and they have to spray it on towards the end. So it's a really big concern. A couple more, and then I'll talk about what you can do to help, and then some of my favorite brands and what I look for. This next one is probably second or third most concerning to me. And that is that there has been research, actually quite a bit of extensive research, and there's actually a foundation dedicated to this because they are so concerned to it, of how basically it says that as our dogs are consuming ultra processed food, which is kibble, as our dogs are consuming over their lifetime ultra processed foods without the addition of real fresh foods over their lifetime, leads to the production of advanced glycation end products. And these are also known as AGEs. Like I said, there's a foundation called AGE Foundation that is dedicated to educating about this and teaching us as pet owners and scientists and nutritionists and veterinarians how to combat this and how to make this not such a big is such a big issue because it is so concerning. And AGEs, or advanced glycation end products, are damaging compounds that are created during the processing, production, manufacturing process of kibble that negatively impacts the long-term function of our dog's inflammation system. Because our research has shown that there's association of inflammation with the production or continuous exposure to these AGEs in the body, which can be, unfortunately, associated with common canine chronic diseases. For example, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, osteoporosis, atherosclerosis. There's a lot of concerning issues with these AGEs. And the accumulation of too many of these AGEs in the body is associated with sustained and long-term inflammation in their organs and tissues. And again, how do dogs get exposure to these is by consuming a lifetime of extruded and ultra processed foods. Also, another concern is or are protein sources in our kibble. So, if you follow me for any length of time, if you're not subscribed to me on the YouTube channel and you want to see more content like this, make sure you click that follow here on Instagram or on YouTube, or subscribe, because this is where you learn how to train and feed your dog better. But if you follow me for any length of time, you know that if I'm looking at a kibble, I'm going to be looking at the back of the bag at the guaranteed analysis where it shows the fat percentage, it shows the protein percentage, and I want that protein percentage in an ideal state to be at least 29, ideally 30 to 32% or higher, maybe 28% at the lowest. Here's the catch. I want that percentage of protein to be primarily from meat sources. BK Pets just bought it. Okay, you guys do not need to do that, by the way. Thank you. If you guys are not following the BK Pets, they're honestly some of my best friends here on social media. Like, love you guys. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So follow them, connect with them. Whatever you do with me, you should do with them because they're amazing. Everything they do is incredible. So the problem is, going back to protein, is most of the time you see the protein percentage is high. You'll even see on the front of the kibble bag that the protein percentage, it'll say high protein, a great source of protein in this food. But then when you break down the ingredients, you notice that much of the protein is coming from non-animal sources. For example, it'll come from ingredients like corn, soy, legumes, which is highly concerning because dogs are scavenging or facultative carnivores, meaning that they don't need a diet of only meat, which is a cat, which is an obligate carnivore, but they do need a diet primarily consisting of meat from animal products. And unfortunately, a lot of kibbles out there are filling their food with plant matter, low quality, cheap plant matter like corn, soy, legumes, to artificially mislead us as pet parents to think that the protein source or the protein amount is actually higher than it is. This is highly frustrating to me because it's so misleading to you as the pet parent. We now know that we need to turn the bag of kibble over, right? We need to look at the guaranteed analysis. We need to look at the ingredients. We see the high protein. We see that the first couple of ingredients are meat or meat byproduct, and we're feeling good about it. We're excited, we're pumped. But what you don't necessarily see is they may be ingredient splitting, where they're breaking up these lower quality, higher protein ingredients like corn, soy, and legumes into subcategories like sorghum and millet, which are basically the same thing. They'll separate them. I think Taste of the Wild does this, but they're high protein. So it'll make it look like they're lower in the ingredient deck. This is what ingredient splitting is. Or they'll add ingredients like pea fiber, pea protein, and pea starch, all within the ingredient deck. And what that does is it makes it look like peas are lower in the ingredient deck because they know that you and I would never be comfortable with feeding a food with peas or corn or soy in the first 2 to 3 ingredients. So they break it up into subcategories so they can mislead us. And that is why I've spent as much time as I had creating my dog food list of my favorite dog food brands that don't do this, which is linked in the description of my YouTube video. It is completely free. I have done, gosh, I've been studying pet food for, I don't know, 7, 10 years now. And I give everything I have for free because, there's no gatekeeping here. This is for you to use as a resource to make an informed decision. Jenna Quayle, thank you. Thank you for the badge and the support. That means the world, far more than you'll ever know. So if you guys do have questions, I'm going to start getting to the Q&A here soon on the YouTube channel. So please go over there. It's just my name. But let's talk about, we talked about the doom and gloom. We talked about why kibble in general, regardless of the brand, can be really complicated if our goal is to help our dogs live and thrive as long as possible. And that's all I want for you and your pet. So let's talk about some ways to improve kibble. And then let's talk about some things that I specifically look for in my kibble. First thing to improve kibble, there's really 3 things. First and foremost, and I alluded to this earlier, is by adding real fresh foods, high moisture, nutrient dense foods to the bowl. Now, there's a really specific way to do this. First and foremost, I will have linked in my description of my YouTube below my favorite food toppers for you. But what I like to recommend to people, I won't say recommend, but what I like to suggest you to consider if you want to boost your dog's bowl and you want to kind of avoid the myriad of negative things I mentioned in the past 20 minutes, is to remove about 5 to 10% of your dog's kibble. Remove it. Replace that with real, whole, pet safe, fresh foods. A couple examples that are really easy, fairly affordable. Canned, no salt added, wild caught sardines are an excellent, almost whole food source. Probably my favorite thing to add, and I learned this from Dr. Ian Billinghurst. If you did not see our live together, we've done a few. We did an interview together back in 2018, 2019 at the Holistic Veterinarian Conference when we connected in person. And then I've done a few virtually. And his recommendation, and I've attached to that because I've done my research and it's incredible, are raw, meaty bones. If you have questions on raw, meaty bones, leave them in the comments and I'll talk about that in the Q&A section, which we're almost at. The reason I love raw, meaty bones is, one, they are almost a complete food source as is in terms of the meat, the protein, the amino acids, the micro and macro nutrients. Is so much of it is there. It's highly enriching for dogs. Keyword, I said raw, not cooked. And it is an immense dental cleaner. It is arguably the best way to clean our dog's teeth naturally, not those green colored chews. Another option you can add are pet safe vegetables, which most of them are safe. Obviously, we want to avoid onions. Obviously, we want to avoid an excessive amount of garlic, but in little bits is totally fine. But generally, like cabbage, kale, spinach, lightly steamed is great. But if you want your dog to get the most out of it, really crushing it, breaking down those cell walls so the dog can actually absorb the nutrients from it, almost mimicking what it would be like if the dog was eating a deer that they tracked on their own and ate the internal insides of the dog. It'd be broken down by the animal's stomach acid. or fermented. Those are my highly preferred ways to feed it. Cold pressed in like a bone broth that's pet safe is also another great way to do that. That leads me to bone broth is an excellent pet safe bone broth is an excellent way to add in healthful healthy ingredients to the food and moisture. Remember we talked about moisture before. A couple other things that I love adding is a pure plain pumpkin. You can even make your own pumpkin puree at home with your own organic pumpkin. Produce wise or fruit wise, bananas. I prefer green bananas, which I learned from Dr. Karen Becker, as you know, a dear friend, mentor of mine, because there are more pre and probiotics and less sugar when they're green. Uh, Blueberries, but not just any blueberry, ideally wild blueberries. I talk about this a lot, but there's twice the number of antioxidants in wild blueberries. The best thing you could do is find them on sale at your local grocery store in the frozen section and stock up. Again, crush those down so they can get the most out of them. You could take a whole carrot, you could soak it in some bone broth for an hour to 2 hours, freeze that carrot, and there is a healthy, all natural dental chew. And is also a great way to bulk up stool. So that's one way. The other way to get the most out of your dog's kibble is by keeping it within the original bag, storing that bag in an airtight container, and using a bag clip on the bag itself to truly keep it out as much oxygen and light as possible to avoid oxidation and further depletion of nutrients as soon as you open that bag. And this is highly frustrating to many pet parents when I say this, but the best way to get the most bang out of your buck for your dog's kibble is by feeding it within 2 to 4 weeks of opening it, regardless of the expiration date. And this is because past the 30 days, the amount of oxidation, the risk for mold, and the potential for rancidity in the fat is too high. And then the third final thing to improve everything I talked about before is by picking a better kibble because there are better options out there, in my opinion. So, again, my favorite brands and my favorite kibbles and fresh foods and cooked foods or raw foods are on my dog food list. It's linked in my description of my YouTube below, or you can go to rachelfusaro.com/dog food. Pretty simple. It's completely free. The reason I do have you give your email for it is because this is a living document, and this document will be updated as soon as a brand changes their sourcing or their recipe for the worse, because that happens and regularly, and they don't have to tell you when that happens. So I need to email you as soon as those things happen. So that's why I do that. I also did not want to make a downloadable PDF that people could share without context, because what you'll notice in my dog food list is that I don't just say, I love this brand. I give you the why, and I also give you cons and pros about the food. Because again, my goal is not to tell you what to do. My goal is to give you the resources to inform to for you to become an informed pet parent so that you can make decisions based on what's best on for your dog. And yes, if you go to my YouTube channel, Rachel Fusaro, you can subscribe there. That'd be great. So a couple things that so that'll be the list of my dog foods. I update it regularly, so check there. A couple things that I look for: manufacturing. When it comes to my pet's food or what I would recommend or suggest, the least processed food is my favorite option. So we're looking for foods that are not cooked at as high of temperatures or processed at as high of pressure as most kibbles are. So that means that I like all kibbles, all traditional popular kibbles are cooked and extruded at extremely high temperatures. In my opinion, less processed, more fresher options are foods that are baked, air dried, dehydrated, freeze dried. That's actually in order of my preference, baked being the lower, freeze dried being the highest. Gently cooked is next up there. And then raw, fresh food is the highest. The reason I used to be really gung ho, and I actually had a lot of negative responses on this about raw food is the only food because that's what I prefer feeding my dogs as their primary diet, but I do rotate. What I've learned over the years of doing this and talking with thousands of you at this point is raw is not feasible or realistic for everyone right now. So I've also learned that while I believe raw, what I mean by raw, by the way, is raw meat, raw organ, raw crushed bone in a complete and balanced format. Um, Raw may not be in your comfort zone today, and that's absolutely okay. So I provide other options of things that I would feed. And sometimes I feed a gently cooked food. Sometimes I feed a freeze dried food if we're traveling, for example, or I forget to defrost the raw. So that's what I look for in terms of manufacturing. I'm also looking for the sourcing. I'm tired of hearing brands say, "Oh, this is human grade meat." Okay, this is a pet peeve of mine. I want After I say this, I want you to go look at the treats, the supplements, and the foods that you feed, and uh, tell me if this is what they say is their sourcing. Most times, you're going to see it say see the brand claim that the food or the supplements or the treats are going to be human grade, manufactured in a USDA inspected kitchen. It's monitored by a federal agent. Now, these things are great. That's better than most out there. So I'm not against that. Just understand that all that means is the food is human grade, which is great. Human grade is deemed for human consumption, or it'll say like grass fed, cage free. All of these terms are great and they are better than most options out there. They don't really mean a lot and they're not really regulated. So, what that means is it still could be an animal that is being raised in a less responsible way than what you would be comfortable with. So, I just want you to be aware of that. And the only way to truly know is to ask the brand. If they say, oh, this is grass fed and it's free range, reach out to the brand and ask them, what do you mean by that? Define what that means. And that's absolutely okay. And it's also okay for you to not be as concerned about sourcing as maybe I try to be. I'm, for me, sourcing is really important. Not more than that, but really high up there is regenerative sourcing, which is also called holistic farming, where we're not just thinking about how the animals are treated or raised, but we're also thinking about how the land is treated during the process, how the manufacturing process is impacting our local economy and agricultural. So, those are things that I personally look for. So, when you see me recommending a treat or a food, those are things that I have vetted out to the best of our ability because there are honestly very, 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 very few options out there in the food and treat and supplement category that truly source in the most humane, authentic, responsible, in my opinion, way possible, which is a problem, but that's the reality. Ingredients. So for me, when I'm looking at, so again, I'm listing what are things that I look for in foods. Again, my list is linked in my description of my YouTube, or you can go to RachelFusaro.com/dog food. So ingredients that I look for, I'm looking at the ingredient panel and I'm looking, are they listing the same ingredient multiple times as sub ingredients to try to mislead me to believe that there's less of that ingredient? So I said this before as an example, but peas are very, very popular where they don't want you to realize that the total amount of peas in that food really needs to be in the ingredient panel spot 2 or 3. So instead, what they do is they break up peas into subcategories like pea fiber, pea starch, pea protein, pea flour. You'll see all of those sparsely sprinkled throughout the ingredient panel. So it looks like peas are, excuse me, are further down the ingredient deck than they really are. Whereas if they actually represented, if they actually showed you how high up on the ingredient deck peas were if they were put into one ingredient, which they are, you would be shocked. So I'm looking for ingredients in the food to only appear once, maybe twice, because there's a couple caveats there. I'm also avoiding highly controversial, low quality filler ingredients. A couple examples, which I've mentioned: soy, any forms of soy, there's no need for it, in my opinion. Corn, any form of corn, by the way. Uh, I avoid when there's an excess of oats or barleys or grains, and there's excess amounts of those. I avoid that. Peas, I think we talked about, I avoid an excessive amount of peas are in there once and it's a little bit lower down on the ingredient deck because there is one food that I like that has that. I'm okay with that personally. Again, these are what work for me. We talked about soy, corn, um, any BHA, BHT. Oh my goodness, and flavorings. Okay, I made a TikTok about this in the Instagram reel. Natural flavorings are not regulated really at all by the FDA, meaning that pet food manufacturers can put natural flavoring on the bag of food of beef that you bought because maybe your dog is allergic to all proteins but beef. You buy beef kibble for your dog, and one of the ingredients are natural flavorings. Did you know that under the category of natural flavorings, the manufacturer can add seafood and other meat in there, like chicken, turkey, uh, pork, venison, beef, seafood, any of that can be added in there, as well as essential oils, as well as leaf, bark, and a variety. There's like a whole list of what could be in there that you don't know is in there. So if you have an allergy dog, let's say they're allergic to chicken, and you're feeding a beef food, if it has natural flavoring on that ingredient deck, there could be chicken in your dog's food. And the manufacturer does not have to tell you that. So I avoid foods that do not specifically specify what that natural flavoring is. And it's okay to ask as well. If your bag of food has, or treats or supplements has natural flavoring in there, uh, it's okay to ask what that is. Let's see, other ingredients I avoid. I think those are the main ones. Transparency. So I'm looking for a brand that is open. So, for example, there is not a single brand of food, treats, or supplement that I have ever recommended or suggested or shown that I use that I haven't spoken with the founder or at least a high level, high decision maker person on the company directly. As you guys know, like I do this as a full, this is my full time career at this point, is sharing tips and research so that you can consume that in easy to consume format and then you can make informed decisions. But um, part of that comes with a really big responsibility. So, because I've worked in the pet food industry for years and years, I know that packaging can be completely false. It's not regulated, and brands straight out lie, even the brands we know and love. So, I make sure that I talk to those brands directly. I don't have someone talking on my behalf. So, while that is time consuming and is not as lucrative, I guess, is it could be, it's really important for me that brands, and if a brand refuses to do that, then they don't want to be transparent with me, then I'm not interested. Another thing I look for is mission of the company. I know a lot of times this can be BS, but it's really important to me that I jive and respect the people of the company and their mission. Okay, so with that, friendly reminder, now would be a good time to click that subscribe button if you've received any value from this, because this is the place where you learn how to train and feed your dog better. And make sure you're following on all my social channels. It's just my name, Rachel Fusaro, or Fusaro, as half my in laws call it, on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, because I do share daily dog tips on helping you to dog better, is what I like to call it. I'm going to go through some Q&A here on the YouTube chat. And big thanks to those of you on my Instagram. I appreciate you being here. If you have questions, go to my YouTube chat. I'm going to start doing these. So let's go down to these questions. Okay, so Ashley Elliott asks on the YouTube channel, thinking about starting our pups on carnivore. What are your thoughts? We are on Spot and Tango and they just aren't doing well. Yes. So I love carnivore as a dog food. It is on my dog food list, which is linked in my description below. And the reason I like it is because I've connected with the owners years ago, the founder, and their commitment to pet nutrition is unrivaled. Their formulas are incredible. I know there are some people that are kind of concerned with the legumes in there, but I work with many veterinarians that are really, really love this food for a lot of dogs. I love the fact that they don't use any vitamin synthetic packs. So their nutrients in the food, micro and macro, are derived from real whole food sources. They also are on they're unlike most other kibble out there because they only bake their food at lower temperatures than what traditional kibble is cooked at, which is extruded and cooked at high temperatures. So my thoughts on Carna 4, CARNA 4, is that I really, really do like them for a lot of dogs. Again, my preference, um, oh, sorry, I was just reading the comments here. My preference is more on the fresher end, especially because a downside of Carna 4 is that they are pretty expensive because they are manufactured out of Canada. So getting it here in the States is, and just in general, they're a little bit more expensive, but they do source responsibly. So that's a big benefit. I love this. Chris, subscribe and like people. It's cheaper than a vet visit. I love that. Yeah, like what you guys need to understand is no, I'm not a vet, but you know what I am? I am that crazy dog mom that has built an entire career off of researching from the sources. So my mentors are some of the most renowned and researched and respected veterinarians in the world that I learned from. Um, Part of my degree in nutrition science was learning how to read and analyze research studies so that I could extrapolate data from there and understand biased data and then share that with you. So basically, how I kind of explain it is that I do the research so that you don't have to, or so that I can save you time. So, anyways, that was really sweet. Raw all the way, Mr. Zoo says, love you. Hello, kibble open farm mixed with open farm fresh food would be as good as well. So, I'm a big fan of open farms sourcing. I think that open farm has really changed the game in how they source their food. I actually have a call with them tomorrow. They've been trying to connect for a while now. I've connected with one of their co-founders a while ago, and I have been, yeah, there'll be some interesting things there. So what I will say is I'm a big fan of their food. Now, my preference with open farm is definitely they're gently cooked. My dogs have done fantastic on their gently cooked. It is almost unrivaled in the gently cooked field. Their kibble is great, but their kibble is a traditional high temperature cooked and extruded kibble. So it's important for you to understand that if you're going to feed an open farm, like most kibbles, it's highly important, in my opinion, to at least consider adding real fresh foods that are pet safe to the bowl, which I talked about earlier. And I'll link some of my favorite ones down below. And they also have lines in their food. They have different lines. Let me look up real quick of what I prefer within open farm because they do, and they know I say this, they know that I feel this way. There are a couple of it's their ancient grains line that I'm not against it, and it does work great with some dogs. I prefer their grain-free option. I've seen dogs do far better on this, and from my research, I'm just more aligned with how they formulated. And they actually have a new look on their grain-free lines, but it's very high protein. The ingredients align a lot more with what I'm comfortable with. But generally speaking, Open Farm has a really good reputation. I love their bone broths as well. And like I said, they're gently cooked foods. Some of their treats, not the biggest fan of because of the ingredients in there. Nothing against the company. I'm just always, even though I'm like kind of friends with them, I'm still going to be very transparent with you. And every brand I've ever talked about knows that. Okay, let's go to more questions. It's always hard to figure out what to do. Nature's Logic. When would you use their original recipe over their distinction line? Let me look up. So Nature's Logic is a really interesting brand because Nature's Logic used to be, it is on my dog food list, and they used to be really esteemed in their in the pet nutritionist and veterinarian community. Let me look at here. Let me look. Okay, so they have their distinction line. I know it's on my dog food list, but I'm kind of forgetting the two. Okay, so their distinction line, preserved. And then I'm just looking at there. You know what? I think going forward, I'm going to do a Okay. Can you guys comment below if I should actually do screen shares and like literally show you how I look at these foods? I have videos on all of this and how I look at food. So, like, I have this, but if you guys want me to do like certain brands and do screen shares and show you the specific things I'm looking at, that would be let me know about that. So, okay, so let me look at their two lines. Let me first look at their distinction line. Um, they have chicken, millet, um, spray dried chicken liver. That's interesting. I love how they use clay. I think that can be great for gut health for a lot of dogs. So I love the distinction line. I really like because they have no potatoes or no potatoes and no peas, which I really like. Their protein is really high in the food, 35% and higher, depending on the protein, which I really like. They have a great amount of fat, which I'm a fan of. So I really like that. Their more original line is, I think this is the one that has a little bit lower protein. And if I look at their ingredients, um, actually not that different. So I really like this. And one thing I notice on their, where is it? Oh, let me look real quick. Oh, interesting. One thing I notice on their ingredients is that they are using real whole foods, dried artichoke, dried mushroom, dried spinach, dried blueberry. And, you know, granted, these are probably in lower quantities within the actual food. I really like that. So I think for me, if I was looking for, I would probably go the distinction line because of the no potatoes. I'm just not a big fan of potatoes and peas. If I can avoid it, I typically will. Let's go to other questions. Hello, everyone. Brandon's Recovery TV. Yes. Okay, what about just yeah. Can you do a review on Ollie's baked kibble? I have done a full review, not full actually, a partial review on their baked kibble. For a baked kibble, it's actually not that bad in my opinion. Do you have a feeding guide on how to change foods without causing stomach upset? Yes. So I do have a video that I talk about on my YouTube. You can just search up RachelCaraFusaro transition. But it talks about how to start feeding real fresh foods or to transition to a new food. And the way that, hi Finnegan, the way that I like to do it is slow and steady. A lot of people might recommend to just start adding it right away. For me, to set your dog up for success is really valuable to start adding new, fresh, real pet safe foods slow and steady. And one big reason I recommend that is because most of the time people asking me about adding foods to the bowl, they're typically feeding a traditional kibble. And this means the kibble has been cooked and extruded at high temperatures, as we talked about. And this means that the live, real ingredients are very minimal, meaning that the gut microbiome of your dog is probably not super diverse, meaning that adding fresh foods with real living bacteria, good bacteria, very likely will cause GI upset. So let's start slow by adding in no more than 5% at a time of the bowl, a couple pet safe foods at a time, and just gradually increasing over several days at minimum, like a week at minimum, up to a month. So that's how I would do it. I wish you could recommend treats and supplements in Canada. I know I'm working on it. I have a friend there who is helping me develop a list that has similar ideals. So that's coming. Screen share would be good. Thank you, Celestial Divana. What is your opinion on Farmer's Dog and Vital Essentials? So Farmer's Dog is great for a gently cooked food. They do add vitamin synthetic. So I have a full YouTube video going in depth on Farmer's Dog, which if you just type RachelCaraFusaro and type in Farmer's Dog, you'll see it. I also on that same video talk about Ollie. Farmer's Dog is great because it's palatable. It's a great transition. Speaking of transitioning foods, it's a great way to transition from a processed kibble to like a farmer's dog and then eventually go to a raw food. So I look at a food like Spot and Tango, open farm cooked, uh, Ollie's gently cooked and Farmer's Dog gently cooked. I look at those foods as the gateway to getting you to feed a more raw, fresh food diet. And raw meaning it's not cooked. So you have like your ultra processed kibbles, then you have your kind of less processed foods like freeze dried, dehydrated, baked. And then you have your gently cooked foods and then your raw foods that are not cooked at all. And that to me, for most dogs, is optimal. So I do like Farmer's Dog. I like their sourcing. I like how supportive they've been of me. So what I mean by that is when I first connected with them and had a call with them, they were so open with connecting me with anybody on the team that I wanted to be connected with, and were very open about answering every single question I had, even though it was probably annoying. I don't love that they use vitamin synthetic packs. They probably do that because it's a little bit less expensive for them to do that, but it is a higher cost food. So um, those are pros and cons. I love how convenient it is because it literally ships to your door. And then I think you asked about Vital Essentials. They make some amazing treats, I'll say that. Their foods are good. They use vitamin synthetics, but they do make a freeze dried food that is great for on the go, higher protein, which I really like. And they don't really add, I don't think, any filler ingredients. So I really enjoy that. What brands do you feed your pups? So I feed a variety. So I do some DIY, and I will be, if you're following, you get to hear this. I will be sharing those recipes soon. But here's the best part: it's not just going to be my recipes, because that's not, there is so much that there's a huge responsibility that goes into formulating dog food. I don't want to take on that responsibility for others, for my own and friends and family. That's great. So what I've done is I've compiled some of mine, and this is like 18 months in the making. I've compiled recipes from very special people that I will be sharing with you. So if you're not subscribed or following, you're going to miss out on that. So make sure you subscribe, click the like, all that. Interesting. I love you so much. Thank you, Kula. Les, have you reviewed grandma's? Oh, I didn't finish my question. So back on the foods that I feed. I have my attention span is like this. So I do some DIY, homemade dog food. I do some raw food. I feed some regional raw, meaning some brands that are local to where I live that aren't necessarily widely commercially available. I love brands like, that I love Bones and Company is a great raw food. You know that for the raw food, I love Raw Bistro, another great brand. I love Solutions, that's another awesome brand. And I love um, Viva Raw is also great. Um, what was the other one? Oh gosh, there was one. There's one available in Southern California. My friend makes it. Oh my goodness, it's like SoCal raw dog food. It's a regional one, but I really love that one. Uh, in terms of gently cooked brands, my favorites are um, Open Farm gently cooked that I'll feed my dogs. I notice I do rotation. Farmer's Dog at times, and then I'm drawing a blank. Raised Right, amazing, amazing gently cooked food formulated by my mentor and friend, Dr. Becker. So huge, huge fan of that food. And then sometimes I'll do a freeze dried food. Open Farms freeze dried is pretty incredible. And another one I really, really love is going to be Simple Food Project. And gosh, there's another one. They're on my dog food list that I love. There's a lot. Carol, there's so many options available. It's overwhelming. It absolutely is. So, Carol, that is why I made the dog food list that I did, which is linked in my description on my YouTube below. And it's also rachelfusaro.com/dog food, because it is overwhelming. So instead of just making this like static list, I made a list of foods that I um, love. I tell you why, what dog they might be good for, pros and cons, so that you can kind of read through, find what dog food aligns with you. The good thing is, from my list, in my humble opinion, my personal opinion, it'd be hard to go wrong. Also, work with your vet. That's my legal. Recommendation. Always work with your vet for any health, medical, any kind of need. Okay. What other questions? I feed back to Raw and Raw Performance in Ontario. Mr. Zeus, can you DM me on Instagram if you Rachel Fusaro more about brands you love in Canada? I'm building out a list and want to make sure that you need to start your own dog food brand. I love it. I am asked that all the time. If you guys would want to see products by me, just leave a comment. Be curious to see what you say. It's not going to happen though. Don't worry. Soundless, been told what Honest Kitchen clusters. Ooh, okay. Honest Kitchen, I love their treats. Boy, do they have some good treats. The ones that are single or like two ingredient. Uh, their food, on the other hand, their dehydrated foods are great in that they're less processed than a traditional kibble. However, a lot of their dehydrated foods and formulas are higher carbohydrate and more starchy ingredients than I would feed, even though it is less processed than a kibble. So the pros of it are the sourcing. It was the first food, fun fact, to ever legally, and I think the only one technically that legally can put on their branding that it's human grade. So I love that about it. I love Lucy, the founder. All great things about that food, the messaging, the purpose, the mission. Uh, the ingredients, I'm not the biggest fan of, to be honest, just how I feel. Nothing against it. It's just there are other options, in my opinion, that are going to be less processed. Two crazy cat ladies, Vibrant Canine. Thank you, Vibrant Canine. So, by the way, the two crazy cat ladies and my friend, Pet Parenting Recent. Hello, hello, hello. Um, are I mentioned Bones and Co as well. They are two accounts that you have to follow. I did a podcast with the Pet Parenting Reset, so she's in my Instagram chat. Check her out. The two crazy cat ladies are your go-to for cat anything. Dear friends of mine, dear friends of mine. Family at this point, honestly, and some of the most amazing human beings. Jay and Adrian, I love you. Please go subscribe to them if you have a cat, think you want a cat, or send everybody's information to cat owners. I get emotional thinking about how much I love you too. Okay, let's see. Let's get some RF chews. I love it. RF chews. That kind of goes. I love it. Yes, we would love to see a food by you. Love it. Thank you. Ashley Jensen. Ooh, Ashley Jensen asks a question about recalls. So everybody put in the comment section, whether you're watching this live or on replay, if you are concerned about recalls on your dog's food. First and foremost, a lot of people are concerned about raw food and recalls. While the data is skewed because there's so much more kibble in the market. If you look at the FDA, the amount of recalls for things like salmonella in kibble is far outweighs than those found in a raw fresh food diet. Just want to throw that out there. Secondly, I want you to become comfortable with, and please hear me when I say this, I want you to become comfortable with your dog's food eventually, likely, or treat getting a recall. And you're going to be like, wait, what? The reality is, whether the food is raw or ultra processed, the reality is that on things like salmonella. When but the problem is that salmonella is present everywhere all the time. So what happens is, even that's why there's so many bags of kibble. Thousands of pounds of bags of kibble have been recalled due to contaminations like salmonella, for example. Even though they're cooked, salmonella being found present. And so, what I want you to become comfortable with is not accepting that to be a reality, but understanding that it's probably going to happen, which is why you follow me on my channels and you're on my email list, so that I can alert you as soon as these things happen. And you want to be cautious and wary of it, but understanding that it's likely going to happen. The likelihood of your favorite brand getting a recall is likely going to happen. It's something I've come to terms with and understood, that is, it doesn't come down to finding a brand that has never had a recall, because some of the best brands have had recalls. How these recalls go about can be highly shady on government side, but we're not going to, that's not what this conversation is about. So it's really, 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 really difficult to judge a brand by a recall. What we can judge a brand by is how they handle the recall, how open and transparent they are about it, and what they do to alert all of us as consumers. So I just want to make sure that we all become comfortable with, just because a brand has a recall doesn't mean it's a bad brand per se, right? And I'm saying this from somebody who came from the pet food industry, who would be in these mastermind groups with owners of your favorite brands, these founders and owners and formulators of your favorite brands, and learning from the back end that we don't accept recalls, but they happen, and sometimes they happen without really much fault to the brand. So how I look at it is making sure that the brands are transparent, open with us, and if and that they're keeping in contact with us. That's how I look at it. I love this channel. Thank you so much. Always concerned about recalls. um uh, IJ, what are some sources and places we can go to for creating our homemade recipe? So in the chat, I'm going to give you where you can sign up to get those. For those of you watching on replay, the link is in my description. Sign up for my email, and I will send you all of the resources of how to get homemade DIY recipes for treats, DIY enrichment, and dog food recipes. The address is RachelCaraFusaro.com/contact me. Yes, Chris, I love it. So Chris was saying, yes, back in June, a brand had a voluntary recall due to threat of salmonella, and they agree it seems like it's bound to happen. Yeah, this kind of stuff is going to happen. We're working with raw materials, so it happens. This is awesome. So I think this has been, I think we've been on here. Okay, we've been on here for an hour. This has been great. I appreciate you. So I want to give a big thanks to everybody who's joined. Make sure that you have clicked the subscribe button here on YouTube and that you turn on the notification bell. I will be going live weekly. So bring your questions, leave comments of what you would like to have me talk about in the future. I wanted to start with this because I'm going to be building off of this series talking about dog food brands. And I will be reviewing dog food brands live with you. And based on the comments here, doing a, you guys hear Marlo? Look at her. She's like, Finnegan, play with me. Yeah. Doing live reviews of dog food brands, treat brands, bringing on special guests. So please make sure that you click subscribe, follow, all the fun things. Thank you for being here. I'm living my dream, and I only get to do this because of you. So every minute you spend with me, every time you share my content, every time you interact with my content, you are making 9-10-year-old me's dream come true by being able to serve you as my career. Like this is my livelihood. So thank you. I will be back next Sunday, and tomorrow, Monday, January 30th. So if you're watching this after January 30th, it's already live. I will be releasing a video reviewing 4 popular dog food brands. I'll be talking about Canidae, Purina, Taste of the Wild, and a couple other popular brands. So if you're interested in that, Marlo says hello. If you're interested in that, then make sure that you go to my YouTube channel and check it out. Okay, that's it. I'm gonna go. Thank you for subscribing, Fab. Chris, I appreciate you. Kukla, thank you so much. Yukla, Chillwire, Ashley, in Florida. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. Okay, here we go. Bye, guys. Thank you so much.